Hello, and thank you all for joining us today for Energy Source Innovation Stream, where we highlight new energy technologies with the potential to reshape the global energy system. It's been a while since we've been here at Innovation Stream, so we're really glad to be back. My name is Randy Bell, and I'm the director of the Global Energy Center at the Atlantic Council. Today, we will be hearing from Leo Simonovich, the Vice President and Global Head of Industrial Cyber and Digital Security at Siemens Energy, who will discuss how his company aims to address issues of cyber vulnerability in a world where critical energy infrastructure and energy systems are increasingly digital and connected to the internet. I have several reminders before we get started. First, you can follow us on Twitter at AC Global Energy and use the hashtag InnovationStream. Second, after Leo's presentation, you can submit questions through the Q&A function on Zoom, and I will try to get to as many of these as I can. If you're watching on another platform like YouTube, unfortunately, we cannot take your questions. So please let me welcome Leo to the Atlantic Council. Leo, thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you and your family are doing well. It's great to have you back here on Innovation Stream.
Randy, it's glad to be back, and thanks so much for the introduction. And a special thank you to the Atlantic Council for hosting this event. Before I get into our new platform, EOS.ii, I want to talk about how the digital revolution is reshaping the energy industry and how it holds the promise to a brighter future. That is, if we can secure it. The digital revolution is the key to unlocking a more innovative, sustainable, connected global economy. This future hinges on transforming the decades-old analog machines that run the world's energy and industrial sectors into a hyper-connected network of physical and digital assets. So how do we begin to think about this future and making it a reality? How does it all work? The answer is the industrial Internet of Things. Because of the digital revolution, companies are adopting new innovative business models that digitally connect physical assets with operational technology, together with information technology. Industrial IoT is what links the digital and physical worlds together. It opens unlimited possibilities to improve efficiency, enhance safety, and optimize operations by leveraging software, big data analytics, advanced sensors, and artificial intelligence. Harnessing this power holds the promise of ultimately accelerating the energy transition, enabling an all-electric future that we're all striving for, and catalyzing new industries only possible with connected infrastructure. Yet, a future run on industrial IoT has an Achilles heel: cybersecurity. As companies digitize everything, from renewables and electric vehicles to retrofitted smart grids and pipelines, they also make themselves more vulnerable to cyber attacks. And right now, they lack the capability to stay ahead of attackers. The digital revolution is expected to add a whopping 2.5 billion industrial devices in the next 2 years. In each of those new digital nodes presents a possible entry where a malicious actor can enter or manipulate energy infrastructure. And criminal enterprises in rival nation states have already shown that they can hijack or destroy critical infrastructure at the touch of a button. So how do we even begin to wrap our heads around a solution for a problem this big and this complex? Let's start with some of the core challenges. Securing industrial IoT eludes even highly skilled defenders for one simple reason. Most companies lack the in-house capabilities to monitor and detect potential cyber attacks across an operating environment of physical and digital assets, and doing so equally. For most chief information security officers, or CISOs as they're known, Gaining insights into physical devices and digital networks linked by an IoT platform is an overwhelmingly complex technical and capability challenge. So from a technical point of view, to identify and act on cyber threats, defenders require visibility to spot anomalous behavior across their operating environment. And then they need to understand the context of these abnormalities to separate malicious threats from benign commands. However, and this is a big however, most security operations centers are engineered to identify cyber attacks on IT systems rather than OT assets. And that means many of these technologies don't match the complex threats now facing IoT. But as with many things, technology is only half the battle. It is also a capability challenge too. Industrial IoT companies need their SOCs and defenders operating those SOCs to secure physical assets with the same expertise and proficiency as they would with digital assets. Not only are OT experts hard to come by, but no solution existed up until now to level up SOC's physical cybersecurity and integrate it with digital defense protocols. So the deficit most CISOs lack is the ability to equally understand and act on threats in both physical and digital worlds under a unified platform. And this is exactly the challenge that we set out to solve at Siemens Energy. This is why Siemens Energy built EOS, the first AI-based monitoring and detection platform to serve, as we see it, the foundation of an IoT fusion SOC for energy and critical infrastructure. Our scalable software provides defenders with clear and in-depth insights to take action against cyber attacks through a single pane of glass interface. Now, that was a lot, and let me unpack that a little bit to help provide a bit more explanation. To truly stop cyber threats and critical infrastructure, you need to understand cybersecurity from the physical assets first. There are only a few companies, Siemens Energy included, with this type of understanding. Companies that actually engineer the assets attackers can exploit and employ those engineers who are sent out into the field to investigate attacks. That's the standpoint from which we need to address the problem. We developed EOS because very few companies have the technical capabilities to monitor and detect threats in-house, nor are their SOCs able to defend a mix of heterogeneous physical and digital assets with their existing IT platforms. Our software enables CISOs to address the most pressing needs in securing IoT operating environments, closing their SOC's OT capability gap. It allows companies to establish a foundation for IoT cybersecurity under unified solutions managed in-house, a fusion SOC that was born out of our expertise securing the physical world. So finally, after all that, let me briefly explain how it all works. EOS starts by addressing the immediate needs in most SOCs to close the gap in OT capabilities and then bringing together OT and IT visibility and context. The only way to do this is by mastering the technical feat of creating a unified threat stream. To do this, we use a proprietary method called process security analytics to standardize and translate OT and IT data into a common language. This reveals anomalous behavior and patterns that match known cyber attacks. At the heart of EOS is our monitoring and detection engine. With AI, machine learning, and predictive analytics at its core, EOS makes sense of billions of data points that comprise physical and digital relationships in industrial environments, correlating abnormalities that would otherwise be insusceptible to cyber analysts. Our detection engine teaches itself the normal patterns of relationships between variables based on real-world operating data. Much of that data we already consume today for other use cases. But in this case, we're applying it to detect events, prioritize potential threats, and alert analysts to investigate the most consequential anomalies. So what happens when an attack does occur? With EOS's monitoring and detection capabilities, we can employ something we call precision defense. This allows us to determine the extent of a breach so we can guide narrowly targeted responses. And this is important. Without such capabilities, CISOs are left blind. Companies end up being forced to choose between doing nothing or deploying brute force solutions like a sweeping shutdown. This means analysts can get to act on threats they have discovered, interrupt attacks underway, and adopt defenses in real time. With each threat mitigated, the Fusion SOC becomes better at blocking attacks. I want to take time for all of your questions, starting with Randy, of course, but let me first zoom out. The digital revolution is transforming industries right before our eyes. And we call these industries critical infrastructure for a reason. But we need to start thinking about innovation in the energy sector, in industrial world, together with cybersecurity as two sides of the same coin. We need to scale them together. Only then can we address climate change, expand access to essential services, and run successful businesses too. Randy, back to you.
Thanks so much, Leo. Really fantastic. What interesting work that you guys are doing, and really important for addressing an issue that I think goes underappreciated until it's always too late. And so you guys are really getting ahead of it. I actually have a really basic question for you to start off. What does EOS.II stand for?
So EOS, when we were thinking about a name, we wanted it to exemplify and get at the core of the visibility challenge. You cannot protect what you cannot see. And we named it after the Roman goddess of dawn. And in the tradition of many security companies that pick Greek or Roman myths and mythical figures, EOS was the name that really rang true. But what we ultimately wanted to do was to exemplify this challenge of visibility. And so .II stands for intelligent illumination. And it's illuminating of the physical world that we're going after, because we believe that is central to understanding risk and enabling digitalization.
Got it. Thank you. Really helpful. And I think that helps us all understand it a little better. So how is this product different than some of the stuff that Siemens Energy has previously released, some of the products Siemens Energy has previously released to mitigate cyber threats?
So Siemens Energy has been tackling the operational technology challenge for a better part of a decade. First, to secure ourselves, and then take the knowledge that we've built over many decades of maintaining and operating the physical world into the digital sphere. And this is our latest innovation. We've about 6 months ago released an offering called Managed Detection and Response to help companies of all sizes do monitoring and detection, because as I've said, visibility is really key. There are some companies that want to run their security operation centers because they believe it's pivotal or core. And it's for those companies that we've pulled out the technology that we've been using for our managed detection service and are now selling it standalone with the expertise of Siemens Energy. We believe that it's that expertise, the decades of knowledge around how physical assets work, that we need to bring at scale with level of automation to make it simpler for security operations teams and chief information security officers to go after this challenge of OT. Because today, as I've said in my remarks, it's not just a technical challenge; it's also an organizational challenge that we need to tackle, and we want to go after both.
Got it. Thank you. That's really, really helpful. Now, this is energy source innovation stream, so we really do focus on the energy piece of it. This can be used in a wide array of applications, but let's talk specifically about energy for a second. Who do you think the main customer is for this type of product? Is it a utility? Is it an asset owner? Who's going to be using this, and how is it going to help them?
Great question. So many of our customers are fundamentally changing their business models because of the push towards renewables, changes enabled by digitalization that are driving efficiency and new business models. As energy companies change, their install base changes as well. And we recognize that. So it's not enough to just protect a power plant or refinery, because many of our asset owners have both. And that change in the install base is pretty rapid. So we developed EOS to become the foundation, to be evergreen, to be able to monitor a wind farm equally as they do a traditional fossil generation plant. For the simple reason, and that is attacks that start with one asset because of connectivity can quickly traverse themselves through the fleet. So it was important for us to be able to monitor different types of assets, both Siemens and non-Siemens, and look at the diversity of the installed base and monitor across the fleet.
Really, really, really interesting. So if you think about, as you said, the type of assets are changing, but there are also more assets. You think about multiple wind turbines. You think about a number of different solar panels as part of a utility scale solar project. How does that change the cyber threat landscape? Just having more and more surfaces through which an attack can happen.
It makes it more complicated. And we've seen this especially ring true because of COVID and the transition to remote work. In the same way that office workers have gone to work from home, many plant operators are now logging into assets from their couch, which probably is more comfortable than sitting at a plant. I don't know, but. What's true now is that the boundaries between operational technology and information technology are being crossed. And that rapid pace of acceleration has created a mess. There are digital devices that are being added at the edge. There are connections between IT and OT that have been accelerated by COVID. And so now what we have is this complex mesh, expanded attack surface. Mm-hmm. And it's even more important for us to be able to get visibility into this complex environment, because an entry point with one device, and we've seen this down the supply chain with some of the attacks that have occurred recently, can start small and then can very quickly multiply to overtake the whole install base, and in some cases even large part of the energy system.
Yeah. Now with the energy system, you think about not just a diffusion or an increase in the number of assets, but you also think about the different scale of asset owners, where you have some really small companies that are owning a huge number of assets, or a small municipal utility, versus some really, really large companies that are much more sophisticated on this. How do you think through those different types of owners and the different types of sort of structures that are going into the energy system, and how does this product sort of fit along each of those different asset owner categories?
So the reality is that not everybody in our sector is at the same level of maturity, and some companies are just beginning to do some very basic monitoring. We partnered with the Ponemon Institute, a think tank, and asked the question: how many of you asset owners out there are doing any monitoring at all? And only 18%, right, are doing monitoring using some of the more advanced tools. So the reality is, some are just getting started, some are more advanced, and there are some that are getting to this level of being faster detecting attacks. They're getting more prescriptive at identifying threats, isolating them, be more precise about it. Because different parts of the industry are at different stages of the journey, we wanted to build EOS for all different types of companies. Some that are more mature, some that are less mature, and our commercial model reflects that. So you can get started with EOS by if you want to just monitor the basics, or if you want to monitor the whole fleet. So there's enterprise level kind of deployments, and there are some small scale deployments to prove out the value. This is important because a lot of the chief information security officers that are getting pinned to do this kind of work are not responsible for it, and there's a lot of noise out there about tools, capabilities, right? So they need a way to get started that's not complicated, but over time they need a foundation for their SOCs, and that's what we aim to build.
Got it. So let's think about sort of getting people to adopt this technology, or really just getting that very low percentage. I think, what did you say, 17%? Getting that higher. Taking a step back, what sort of policy framework do you think you need to get a much broader adoption of this technology or this type of technologies to ensure that the energy transition is secure, that our energy system in general is secure, and to make sure that we don't see things like Colonial again?
So from our vantage point, we've worked in this space, a 107-year-old company, and we've been in the space for some time, you can say. And for us, what we industry that's focused on safety and reliability first and foremost. Because of that, the horizon for investment in technology is a lot longer, especially mechanical and electrical. Digital technologies, however, are changing much more rapidly than that. Their shelf life is shorter. And so there's, in general, been hesitancy to adopt emerging technologies like artificial intelligence for two reasons. One is the lack of business models to recover the cost of cyber as companies transition to becoming more digital. And then the other is just general hesitancy of something that seems perhaps less proven. So policy in the federal government has a lot of opportunity here to support private industry by convening and encouraging the uptake of innovation. By proving out use cases, by making capital accessible to companies that are looking to adopt this technology, and by helping think through the business models, and including cybersecurity at the core of those business models. That's super important. And policy, in general, policy sort of has lagged innovation. And in this case, policy needs to become the great enabler, right? To keep up with the change of pace, because there's a large opportunity here for us for a cleaner, greener, more renewable future.
Got it. We've got a really good follow-on question from Barbara Brown in the audience, who asks very specifically about what type of regulation you think should be required before connecting each device. So should companies be required to have some sort of software like yours? Should they? What types of very specifically requirements should you have if they're going to be engaging in critical infrastructure?
Well, regulation in general provides benefits, and those benefits is to establish the foundation for hygiene and security. But compliance does not necessarily equal risk reduction. And so what's important is for companies to understand their risk and then be able to proportionately invest against that risk to build up and shore up their defenses. So what I think is important is not to make the investment in technology, which is changing rapidly, a check the box kind of exercise. What's important is to encourage and incentivize adoption of technology. But we know one thing for sure, the techniques that the bad guys are using are changing, and therefore technology needs to keep up. We at Siemens Energy are going to continue to innovate. So we don't believe that mandating one type of technology or another is being so prescriptive about it when you don't know how the world is going to change in the next couple of years, right? Is probably the most fruitful. What is more fruitful is enabling the operators with the means to choose, right, based on their risk posture, which technologies are going to fit them best.
Got it. Really interesting. Okay, very specific question coming in from Matt Bryza, our colleague here at the Atlantic Council, and he asks if this technology can detect zero-day attacks without comparing current anomalies with previous cyber attacks.
So that's a great question, and that has been a focus of ours for quite some time. We take two approaches. One approach is we've asked our 5,000 control engineers, right, to help us paint a picture of how the attackers could get in and cause damage in the physical world. We've taken that knowledge and we've codified it in our detection engine. We applied artificial intelligence to it to be able to detect changes both in the physical and digital worlds together. We call that context. That context is enriched with threat intelligence. Siemens Energy is, because of our install base, where in many parts of the world, we collect lots of threat intelligence together with customers because we're part of global certs and because we produce threat intelligence for ourselves. So we use that, we pipe that data into EOS, that's OT specific threat intelligence to help enrich our detection.
That's really, really helpful and really, really interesting approach to a really tricky challenge. So we have time for one final question, and Leo, this is one that I think will speak directly to you. It comes from Barbara Brown again, who's really engaged in this, and she asks: should bankers and investors be assessing risks before investing in energy assets or other type of digitally connected assets? And I'm going to follow on with that and say, should they be? And if they're not, why aren't they? And how should investors be thinking through the risks that they face from cyber?
Yeah. Well, so Barbara, thanks for that question. Randy probably planted it with you. I'm not sure, but
I don't know who Barbara Brown is as best as I know. Barbara, I apologize if we do, but I didn't plant this. I assure you.
So I think the short answer is yes and yes and yes and yes. So what's happening is that the investment community is increasingly making bets on the energy transition. It's investing in assets. It owns those assets. And unlike large corporates, big utilities that have been under a regulatory framework for a better part of a decade, many of these asset owners are new to this challenge, and they need to address it. I think they're pretty well predisposed because when you're an investor, you have to think about cost benefits and then risk-adjusted returns. So risk is something that's really important to understand when buying an asset. And cybersecurity, and this is my message to the investment community, is one of the biggest risks. It is the great showstopper. So it is important for the investor community to get its hands around this problem, to figure out its role in this space, to demand better security from those that operate the assets on their behalf, and to take a broader approach to this, an ecosystem approach. They're part of a larger system and part of a larger community. So it's important that they think of this problem in the dependencies from a collective defense perspective.
Got it. Well, thank you, Leo, and thank you, Barbara, for that really great question. Unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. Really, Leo, again, thanks, and it's a pleasure to work with you. Be sure to connect with Leo on LinkedIn and follow Siemens Energy on Twitter. I want to thank everyone who helped put this event together, including Zach Strauss, Jordan Birkenstein, Lauren Holland, Jackson Styron, Andrew Gumbiner, and all of our colleagues at Siemens Energy. This presentation will be available on the Atlantic Council website, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. So please do share it with your colleagues. And then take a look at the Atlantic Council website for future Global Energy Center events. We've got a lot going on. So please stay tuned for a lot, particularly in October and leading up to COP26 in November. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and have a good rest of your day.